Hi, my name is Hunter Lovins. I am president of Natural Capitalism Solutions. We work with companies, communities, countries on ways to implement more regenerative practices profitably. Welcome to the Anthropocene. You know this. We're in trouble as a species. And I'm not going to go much into all of the challenges facing us. Just to say, Dr. Sylvia Earle, the great oceanographer, says what we do in the next 10 years matters more than what humanity does in the next 10,000 years. We are beyond the planetary boundaries, and yet we are failing to meet the basic human minimums. This is the work of Kate Raworth from Oxford, whose new book, Donut Economics, urges us to create an economy that is in the sweet spot below the planetary boundaries, but above the human minimums. This is the safe and just operating space for humanity. Nelson Mandela said, social equality, equity, is the key to human happiness. Here's where we are today. Well, this is last year. 85 people had as much wealth as the poorest 3.5 billion on the planet. Here is today's figure. 8 men. 8 men have as much wealth as 3.5 billion people on this planet. Are you okay with that? I'm not. And here's where we get to. This is Pakistan in 2010 when it flooded. 20 million people displaced by climate change, or the now 65 million people, largely displaced by failed states, by climate change. The war in Syria is worsened by climate change. The famine in the Sudan, climate change. 40 years of drought in the Middle East. As a result, these people cannot stay where they are. And if we allow climate change to worsen, there will be more of them. They want to come to Germany. They want to come to Europe. The Germans can't take them, not 65 million of them. Where will they go? At the same time, people in the North feel their lives have no meaning. This cartoon from the New Yorker, what would you suggest that I buy to fill the dark, empty spaces in my soul? In part, we're buying the wrong things. What the North spends on makeup would more than pay for reproductive health care the world around. What we spend on bottled water would 3 times over pay for clean drinking water for everyone. Helen Goodman says normal's getting dressed in clothes you buy to go to work, driving in traffic, in a car you're still paying for to get to the job you need to pay for the clothes and the car and the house you leave vacant all day so you can afford to live in it. And the Financial Times said the cause of the '08 collapse was the zombie American consumer. We're not buying enough stuff. At the same time, the FT chronicled a meeting of central bankers where they said we don't fully understand what's happening to advanced economies. If these boys don't, who does? What's clear is that this way of being on the planet is not making us happy. Gross national product, and its gross, continues to go up, and yet the number of us that are happy has flatlined or even declined a bit. Mandela also said poverty is not an accident. We created it. The good news is that means we can fix it. And this, I think, is the real basis for hope going forward. Hope is not a strategy, but it is essential if we're to get there. Here's the first thing. We just need to share a little more what American bankers paid themselves in bonuses, if spread across the minimum wage earners in the society, would more than double the minimum wage. There is enough money. Money's not the problem. It's how we're deciding to distribute it. But here's what I think is our real challenge. We need a new story. The great theologian Thomas Berry said, we're in trouble because we don't have a good story. We had a story. It told us who we were, what our role in society was. It explained things. And yet this story is now breaking down. So it's worth spending a little bit of time on what was that story and how did it come to be? Because in that history lesson, I think, is part of the answer for where we go forward. How we got here is that 36 men gathered after World War II at a hotel outside Montreux, Switzerland, a hotel called Mont Pelerin. They argued for 10 days and they built the ideology that is today called neoliberalism. And it has some very simple precepts that your personal freedom in the market, in the economy, is really the only thing that matters. Governments are bad because markets are perfect. And if you and all of us compete in this perfect market, the greatest good for the greatest number will magically result. Who were these people? Ludwig von Mises looked at what National Socialism had done to trash Europe and was appalled. Friedrich Hayek was scared of the rise in the East of Soviet collectivism. Milton Friedman believed that the individual was the only legitimate economic actor. They and 33 of their closest friends built this ideology. They formed the Mont Pelerin Society. They got their members as advisors to every head of state on the planet, 3 of them as heads of state, several as central bankers, created the Chicago School of Economics. So if you have had a conventional economics course, this stuff's in your head. In 1971, in the United States, a man named Lewis Powell was asked by the head of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to say why it was that after the 1960s, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, business was not held in high regard. Business had been delegitimized. So the Chamber said, what would it take? How do we re-legitimize business? Powell laid out a strategy. If the Mont Pelerin folk laid out the underlying intellectual foundation, Powell laid out the strategy. And because of his paper, and you can go on the web and download it, it's called the Powell Memorandum. About 5 very wealthy organizations, people, put each $5 million for each of 5 years to create and endow the Heritage Foundation, a group called ALEC, to build the legislation that they thought was necessary, Hudson, Hoover, Heartland, Cato Institute, American Enterprise, a whole array of think tanks. They invested in ideas. They took this wonkish theory of neoliberalism and brought in the best marketers. They focus grouped it, they researched it, they massaged it and messaged it, and they rolled it out over Fox News. In 1980, in my country, the United States, Ronald Reagan was elected. In the UK, Margaret Thatcher was elected. And this ideology won. It became the global dominant economic ideology, arguing for austerity. If the economy is in trouble, cut back, because government is, after all, the problem. Unleash the market. Get regulation off the back of business. The result? Well, we're seeing it today. The '08 financial collapse, the various accounting scandals. This was entirely predictable. What was also predictable was the growth of inequality. Until 1980, all classes of people were coming up together. After 1980, only the 1% or the 0.01%. And this is what has brought us to the point where 8 men have as much wealth as half of humanity. Now, we're an interesting species. We create a story like neoliberalism. And again, 36 men built this story. One man, Lewis Powell, wrote the strategy. And then somehow we think that this is graven truth given us from on high. We made these stories. We can make another story. The humble folk singer Pete Seeger said the key to the future of the world is finding the optimistic stories and letting them be known. So let's start with the story of who we are. The neoliberals, when they gathered, were working off bad science. The then belief in neo-Darwinism said humans are essentially greedy bastards. We are individuals first and foremost, and that's the way it always has been and should be. Now the evolutionary biologists, the anthropologists are telling us that's simply not true. When the pre-humans came down out of the trees in Africa, we were naked, our claws aren't worth much, our teeth are pretty inadequate. We survived, and apparently, we know this from the DNA, the pre-humans were down to something like 18,000 discrete individuals. We almost went extinct. We survived because not only did we acquire and defend, but we bonded. We worked together. We cared more for the group, for all of us, than we cared for individuals. And you are here, I am here, because we are the descendants of those who survived. Say the evolutionary biologists, this is in our DNA. This is why we love Facebook. It's why we love getting together. It's why we tell stories. Because the fourth drive, say these evolutionary biologists, is that we create meaning. We strive to comprehend, and so we tell ourselves stories. What we need to learn is that these are just stories, and we can make a different story. Here's the story of the economy. We, people, planet, are in service to the economy, which is in service to finance. And we're very good at flowing money to the top. What's wrong with this picture? It's wrong way round. Finance is a tool to bring liquidity, money, to a real economy that delivers the goods and services that you and I need. But that economy should be in service to life. John Fullerton spent 18 years with J.P. Morgan. He left as managing director to create Capital Institute. He recently wrote a brilliant paper called Regenerative Capitalism. He points out that nature is sustainable not because it's set out to be, but because it's regenerative. We're moving up the ladder, if you will, up the ramp from a world that is degenerative, where we are destroying life as we know it on the planet, through sustainability toward a regenerative economy. He laid out the principles of what is required for a system to be regenerative. In right relationship, this is ecological economics, that the economy is this little linear process inside of society, inside of the biosphere. We need to remember that nature bats last and owns the ballpark. Holistic wealth. Money is useful, but it's not wealth, which comes from the Old English word well-being. Innovative and adaptive. Humans are entrepreneurial. We begin again. We create things. Empowered participation, that you have a say in the system that affects you. Edge effect abundance. This comes from the biologists, from people like Janine Benyus with biomimicry, that in nature, the most abundant ecosystems are where two come together, where a river meets the ocean, where a forest meets the meadow. Robust circulation. This is the circular economy, Walter Stahel's great concept, now being taken up by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Seeks balance. We're very good at being efficient in flowing money to the top, but that makes us very brittle. We need to be resilient, but a completely resilient system is not very efficient. The trick is to be in balance. And perhaps most important, to honor community and place. We can have a global economy. I'm very fond of Scottish whiskey. We make very good whiskey here in Colorado. But I'm very happy buying my Scotch so long as I know that my local economy has its own integrity, that we're taking care of the place that is home to all of us. How do we get there? How do we implement this stuff? A group of us have laid out this concept of natural capitalism, where you buy time through efficiency. But we have to use the time well to redesign how we make and deliver everything, using approaches like the circular economy, biomimicry, and finally, manage all institutions to be regenerative of human and natural capital, the forms of capital that, at the moment, we're losing. We've got all the technologies we need. For example, we can power the entire world with renewable energy. This is the work of Dr. Mark Jacobson, who showed in 2009 that it's possible, and the work of Tony Seba, a Stanford professor, who says inevitably by 2030, the world will be 100% renewably powered. Why? Because of four things. Tony says when you have convergence of technological innovation and business models, leading to a 10-fold difference in price between how you deliver what it is that you and I want and the new way, you are going to get disruption. And he says there are four technological innovations that are happening. Solar, the price of solar is falling dramatically. Storage, batteries, price falling dramatically. Electric vehicles and the self-driving vehicle, autonomous vehicles, which will deliver transportation as a service. So we won't own our cars. We'll just whistle one up on our mobile whenever we want one. This little autonomous vehicle will come to where we want, take us to where we want to go. So you need no parking, far fewer roads. This will enable us to redesign cities. And it will mean, if Tony is right, he's saying again, by 2030, that's less than 15 years from now, it'll mean the end of the oil, gas, coal, uranium, nuclear, utility, auto industries, and the banks that hold paper on all of these. This is going to be the mother of all disruptions. We have no idea how to deal with it. It will mean a lot of unemployment and a lot of employment opportunities, but we had better start thinking now about how we're going to do this. We already have large companies saying they're going to go 100% renewably powered. Why? Because it's cheaper. The big utilities in Europe misjudged the speed with which renewable energy could come aboard and lost profitability rather badly. It's called the death spiral. If you don't participate in this transformation, you as an industry cease to be the dominant industry. So now you have RWE in particular, Eon's struggling along, saying, right, we're going to be distributed utilities. We'll take all this distributed power and then we'll send it out to where it's needed. Are they going to survive? Right now they're on life support. And it's not harming the German economy. GDP goes up, carbon emissions are going down. We can decouple. We now know that this is possible. Whatever exists is possible. Little Tesla. It is now valued, this is an old number, it's now valued more than General Motors, more than Ford, more than BMW, despite producing 300 times fewer cars. Why? What business is Tesla in? Is it a car company? No, it's a battery company. Because when you combine solar with batteries, you have fixed firm power. Combine that with transportation, and this is what Tony Seba is talking about, you have the disruption of the economy. Proof this year, well, last year and then into this year, there was a big blowout a couple years ago of a gas storage facility, natural gas in Southern California. Pumped a lot of methane into the atmosphere and made the utility say, we won't have enough power for the summer of 2017. Elon Musk pulled together 4 other battery companies and said, yeah, you will. We'll just build you a bunch of batteries. We'll take all the renewable energy that California is producing, pour it into these batteries. They deployed 70 megawatts in 6 months' time. Record speed. And at a price not much more than it would have cost to build gas peaking plants, for which they no longer had the gas because of the blowout. More than 1,000 cities have said, we're going to go 100% renewable. This was in Paris at COP21, where I was there, where we finally sealed the deal. Now, my idiot child in chief has said he's going to pull out, but the rest of the world isn't. And the cities aren't, and the companies aren't. It's over. The age of fossil fuels is over. Now our challenge is to build a world that works for 100% of humanity, as Buckminster Fuller said. In doing this, perhaps the most important thing is soil. We know how to take carbon out of the air and put it back in the soil where it belongs. If we do this 2% increase in the carbon content of the world's soils, you offset 100% of humanity's emissions. We know how to build soil organic matter to as much as 11%. How? This man, Alan Savory, and if you haven't seen his TED Talk, I highly recommend it, is showing how by managing grazing animals the way they co-evolved with grasslands, dense packed because there were predators. If you're a wildebeest and there's a lion moving around, or a zebra or a bison on the Great Plains of America, and there's a wolf, the safe place to be is in the middle of the herd. So everybody's trying to get into the middle. They chop up the soil, they fertilize it, they've eaten everything, and then they move on. And this co-action with the grass enables the prairie grasses to build very long roots. Those roots, and more to the point, the biological community surrounding them, are what trap carbon in the soil. So when the pioneers came across the Great Plains of the United States, they found 10 feet of thick black soil. It's now down to inches because of the way we've been doing agriculture. But we know how to reverse this. We know how to roll climate change backward. This is standing on a bridge in Wyoming, looking north, looking south. North is holistically managed using Alan Savory's techniques. South is conventional management. And when you manage holistically, you can dramatically increase the number of animals on the ground. So people say, eat less meat. No, eat the right kind of meat. Meat that has been holistically raised. Gabe Brown, it's a North Dakota corn soybean farmer who was going broke. Because he was going broke, he said, I got to do something differently. I got to cut my costs. So first he went to what's called no-till. He didn't break the prairie soil. Then he added cover crops. He grows about 26 different species of crops, some of which he actually derives a crop from, some of which become feed for the cattle that he then turns out in the winter. So he doesn't have to raise hay, corn to feed his cows. They feed themselves on the cover crops. He is now wildly profitable, selling a variety of products. He can't keep up with demand. And he's taking carbon out of the air and putting it into the soil. Some of his plots started at 1.3% soil organic matter. In some of his plots, he now has 11% soil organic matter. This over a 10-year period. We can dramatically increase the amount of carbon in the soil if we manage holistically. Oh, but you can't possibly feed the world this way. We need modern industrial agriculture, don't we? Well, no. UNCTAD and UNFAO have both pointed out that 70 to 80% of food on Earth now is produced from smallholder organic agriculture. Organic because they can't afford to buy the inputs. If we help them use the best modern practices, like Gabe is using, like Alan Savory is teaching, we can provide all the food that the world needs. If we just eliminated food waste, we would feed the world today. And we can dramatically increase food production and at the same time start sequestering carbon in the soil. Here is the real cause for hope. In 2015, the world came together. The nations of the world unanimously agreed on the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 goals, which, if you implemented them all, would solve the problems facing us. This, I think, is now our greatest opportunity. Whichever of these you care about, get involved. Pavan Sukhdev and Johan Rockström. Pavan headed up the group, the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity. Johan ran the scientific group that did the planetary boundaries. Said if you start with food and with natural systems, from these, you can meet all of the Sustainable Development Goals. I've just recently seen another such graph saying, start with energy. Myself, I think it doesn't matter where you start, whether it's empowerment of women and girls or partnerships, goal 17. Pick which one you care about and live a life that shows it. When you do this, you will be creating jobs. Occam Steiner, Pavan Sukhdev have both shown that by implementing the Sustainable Development Goals, by building a regenerative economy, we will create jobs. It's happening. Whether it be Harvard Business Review reports or sustainability certification, or my friend Yvonne Chenard getting the cover of Fortune magazine, for God save us, the evil empire going green. Trust me, when Walmart goes green, you know there's a business case. Carbon Disclosure Project showed that the companies that are leading in measuring and managing their carbon footprint have an 18% higher return on investment than the laggards, 67% higher than the companies that say, man, we're not even going to measure. This is better business. But what is the real purpose of business? My friend Ray Anderson said, the purpose of business is to make the world a better place. For those who think that the purpose of business is profit, think again. You make a profit to exist, but business exists for a higher, nobler purpose. It's what young people want. Young people want to work for companies that are making a difference in a job in which they personally can make a difference. And we now know when you are making a difference at work, you're more engaged. Engaged workforces deliver 18% higher productivity, 16% higher profitability. So here's our challenge. Build this new narrative. Build our story. Why are we here? Who are we as humans? How do we want to structure the economy to make it work for 100% of humanity? Lewis Powell built the Powell Memorandum to tell companies how to implement neoliberalism and get us to the state where 8 men have half the wealth in the world. We're building a different memo called the Meadows Memorandum, named after Dana Meadows, the gentle Vermont farmer. Here is our narrative that true freedom and success depend on creating a world where we all prosper and flourish. That institutions serve us best when they recognize our individual dignity and enhance our interconnectedness. And that to thrive, business and society must pivot toward a new purpose, shared well-being on a healthy planet. This new narrative has been rolled out in meetings from Mexico to New York, to Germany, to OECD in Paris. We're now building an organization to take this global. Here is our theory of change. Powell laid out 26 targets. We've laid out 10 that we need to embed this new narrative into culture, business, finance, into all of these aspects of society. A finer future is possible. We have all the technologies. William Gibson, the science writer, said the future is already here, it's just not widely distributed. If we do this, it will unlock the greatest prosperity humanity has ever known. But in order to reach this finer future, we need this new story, a vision of well-being, of engagement with nature and each other. Who's going to do this? This is my favorite Not My Job award. You'd think somebody had picked up the dead possum before they painted the stripe. Maimonides said each of us must see ourselves as though the entire world were held in balance, and any deed we do could tip the scales. Who's responsible? I am, and you are. Thanks so much for caring. Thanks for being part of this. If you have any questions, any comments, I'd love to hear them. This is our website. Please feel free to contact us at Natural Capitalism. And please find what you truly care about and live a life that shows it. Thank you.